Books. They're better with friends. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am having another Books and Brews. If you've never seen this series before, I take 3 books that have a kind of similar theme or similar concept or similar colours on the cover and I tell you what I thought about them. For today's Books and Brews, it's 3 buddy reads. So these are books that I sat and read with some friends of mine. So then we sat together and we talked about what we thought about them, what we liked, what we didn't like, would we read from this author again, and we just generally had a really good time reading the books together. I'm going to talk about them in chronological order of when I read them. So in January, I read Dial A for Aunties with my friend Cora from Tea Party Princess. This is Jessie Sutanto's debut novel, and you're following Medi Chan, who is working as a wedding photographer and is also part of her family's wedding kind of setting up business. They do a lot of wedding planning, and right now they are working on one of the biggest weddings of the season. Medi is also being set up on a blind date by her mother. The date doesn't particularly go very well, up to and including he ends up dead in the passenger seat of her car. Then Medi goes to meet with her mother and also her 3 aunties with whom she's in business, and they have to kind of hide the body throughout the entire events of the wedding, the bridal shower, the wedding ceremony itself, right leading up to after what happens after the wedding. This book is kind of a crossover between Crazy Rich Asians and Weekend at Bernie's. I absolutely loved this. I thought it was completely hilarious. I know that this is not the culture that this book is in, but it was written very much like a Spanish telenovela. So I would imagine it also reads a little bit like a K-drama. I've never watched any of them before, but I know that they can be quite chaotic, that things kind of happen that you wouldn't really expect, or there are a lot of plot twists thrown in. This book did have quite a few plot twists thrown into it. And I will say that I did see a couple of them coming, but there were also a couple that completely took me for a loop. While Medi is at the wedding and getting everything ready and at the hotel where the wedding is going to take place, she also bumps into Nathan, who is now the manager of the hotel where the wedding is at. But Medi and Nathan were in a relationship about 10 years ago. It ended kind of abruptly because Medi kind of got cold feet. And it was really nice to see flashbacks to their relationship when they were back in college, but also seeing them pick their relationship back up. I'm not a huge fan of a second chance romance, but I really liked how it was done here. It was very sweet, it was very cozy, and I really liked how she tried to protect him from all of the chaos that she had brought herself into. This book features quite a lot of Indonesian and Chino-Indonesian culture. You have got the tea ceremony before the wedding. You have got a gift ceremony before the wedding. You've also got quite a lot of Chino-Indonesian wedding traditions throughout this book. A lot of kind of family traditions and family requirements and responsibilities throughout this book. And I absolutely loved learning about those and reading about those. I really love a book where you can discover another culture, one that you're not completely familiar with, one that you're not surrounded by, have never grown up in, and that was something that I absolutely cherished about this book. One thing that I will say that I did not love is that the aunties and how they were called in the book, I know that it was done as a respectful thing in that one, they were called Big Auntie, Second Auntie, and then the third sister was Medi's mother, and then you have Fourth Auntie. I thought it was a little bit impersonal for the reader because I would have loved to know what their names were. I would have loved to see a little bit more of their background. I know that Fourth Auntie is the one who has the best English of all of the sisters, so I believe that if they had emigrated to the United States, she would have been quite young because she would have picked up the language a lot quicker than her sisters would have. But I would have loved to see a little bit more of their backgrounds, a little bit more of what their names even were. It just felt a little bit impersonal for me. But overall, I really loved all of the aunties, especially Big Auntie. I think she was my favourite of all of them. These aunties, however, are the kind of definition of chaotic good. I don't necessarily know if I would love to have them in my life as my aunts. I don't think I would cope with having that kind of meddling in my life, whether it was my personal life, my professional life, romantic life. I think I would like to have a little bit more of a separation between us, but I absolutely, on the other hand, loved how close Medi and her aunties were. I just think maybe they were a little bit too meddling. This book does already have a sequel and it came out in March of this year. It's called Four Aunties and a Wedding. I have got a NetGalley copy of it and I have read it and I really, really enjoyed it, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I loved Dial A for Aunties. It did slip for me a little bit, whereas this one kept me hooked the entire way through. Next is one of BookTok's darlings. You cannot sneeze on TikTok and this book will say bless you. Around Valentine's Day, I read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood with two of my offline friends, Roisin and Rosie. We loved this book. I absolutely buy into the hype so much. This book is about PhD student Olive, who is trying to convince her best friend Anne that she's actually okay with Anne going out with a guy called Jeremy. Olive has been on a couple of dates with Jeremy, but she doesn't really see any vibes. She doesn't see it going anywhere. But Anne is convinced that Olive is going to be super pissed off because Olive has really strong feelings for him. To make Anne sure that Olive is okay with it, Olive kind of lobs the gob on the first person that walks past her. It turns out that this person is Adam, who is one of the faculty at the university that Olive is studying at, and he has this reputation for being really cold-hearted, really cantankerous, really hard-edged, and just has absolutely no pleasant bones in his body. The two then enter into a fake dating situation because Adam needs to convince the university that he's staying around so that his grant is unfrozen, and Olive needs to make sure that Anne thinks that this is all going to be okay. What follows then is, as you would imagine in a fake dating book, a whole lot of situations where the two of them get together, do quite a lot of coupley things, and over the course of the book start to actually realise that there are some real feelings involved. I thought that some of the situations that they found themselves in were a little bit too far-fetched, a little bit too uncredible for me. For example, the fact that they are sitting in a university lecture hall, there's some kind of talk that's happening, and because there are no seats available at all, Olive has to sit on Adam's lap for the entirety of the talk that's being given. I felt like that was a little bit of a stretch too far, and it was a little bit uncredible for me. But something else that I found uncredible is a very tiny character detail. Jeremy, the guy that Anne is interested in, is written as Irish. As an Irish person myself, I have to take umbrage with his name. The characters are written as around my age, so late 20s to early 30s. I have never met a single person in that age gap from Ireland named Jeremy. If I have, and it's a very, very small if, because I'm not sure I ever have, it's probably somebody around my parents' generation, somebody around that age more than around mine. So I do think that there could have been a little bit more research done into what are some of the more popular Irish boys' names from the early 1990s or the late 1980s. Because you have names more so like Irish names like Niall or Ronan or Keith or John or Sean or any other name. I think she was trying not to stereotype him as an Irish person with an Irish name, but then she went and gave him red hair and stereotyped him anyway. I expected this book to be a little smudgier and a little steamier than it actually was. There is one sex scene that covers 2 chapters around 75% into the book, and that was written really, really well. Apart from one sentence encapsulating a part of the female anatomy that I cannot get on board with because I'm a little bit too heavy-chested for it. If you've read the book, you know what one I'm talking about. I really thought that sex scene was written really well. There was also a discussion about Olive being demisexual and what that means for her. And I think that was dealt with really well. I'm not demisexual myself, but I do believe that it was dealt with in a quite respectful manner. I also love that Olive is written as a woman in STEM. It's not something that I've read a lot of in books. I know that the main character in The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang is also a woman in STEM. And it's definitely something that I think we need to see more of in books, especially if it's something that might inspire more women to get into STEM in the first place. There is also a storyline that touches on the Me Too movement and sexual harassment at the workplace, and I really feel like that was dealt with incredibly well, especially the outcome of it, people's reactions to it, and what they did about it, and I really love how that was handled in this book. I thought it was done really, really well, and it actually brought me back to the scene of Professor Callahan in Legally Blonde. I kind of conflated the two of them in my head. I thought that it was done really, really well. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I absolutely loved that at the start of every single chapter, there was a little hypothesis that kind of had to do with what was coming up in the chapter. I really loved that little connection, and I am definitely going to be on the outlook for everything else that Ali Hazelwood has written. The final buddy read that I had for the start of this year was one that I read in March with my friend Michelle from Michelle's Library. We read together Idle by Louise O'Neill. This was Michelle's very first Louise O'Neill book, and the pressure that I felt for her to enjoy it was intense. This book isn't out yet, so I had a NetGalley arc, but it comes out on May the 12th, and if you like the sound of this book, if you've liked any other book that Louise O'Neill has written, absolutely go and pick up a copy of this one. In this book, you are following Sam, who is a lifestyle influencer, a kind of a self-help guru, and has just recently surpassed 3 million followers on Instagram. She's written an essay in the past kind of describing her sexual awakening, one of her earliest sexual experiences, and this was with a friend of hers, a female friend of hers, way back when they were in high school. While Samantha is on stage at a conference, this friend, Lisa, gets in touch with Samantha's manager to say that what Samantha has remembered and what Lisa remembered are two completely different things. Lisa does not remember this as consensual. She does not remember this as something that she wanted to do or enjoyed having done. And now she wants Samantha to understand the implications of what she's saying. This book went into, like so many other Louise O'Neill books, so many tough, difficult topics. You're talking about rape, cancel culture, the Me Too movement, and there are so many things at stake that Louise just deals with so well. She writes more with a scalpel than a pen, but she writes beautifully. I will say that I was not a huge fan of Samantha, but that is a kind of a trope, I would almost say, in Louise's books. You're not supposed to root for the main character. You're not supposed to enjoy them. They're not supposed to sit with you as one of your favorite characters you've already read. But I didn't really like how she was written this time, in that I felt like she was written younger than she was supposed to be. Samantha in this book is approaching or has just hit her 40th birthday, but she actually reads as somebody more in her late 20s to early 30s. She is completely obsessed with her image, how people see her, how she is seen by the outside world, what kind of impression of herself that she's giving out to people. She is so obsessed with her reputation and what people think of her, and you really see that throughout the book. It's a thread that just keeps on going. You can definitely see it in the start of every single chapter, because it starts with how many followers on Instagram Samantha has, and when you see these numbers fluctuate, you really see a change in Samantha's moods, in how she's dealing with people, in how she's dealing with anything that's happening around her, and it's so harrowing to see it. You can also see it in Samantha having gone back to where she grew up to go and talk to Lisa. She wasn't trying to apologize, I don't feel. She was just trying to get Lisa to pull her statement, retract it, say that she had just made it up, say that everything was false. And you get the impression and the understanding that Samantha is doing it solely for her own benefit and has no consideration or thoughts about what it's like for Lisa. I liked the setting of this book. It's set in New York and then small town USA, and I think that made much more of an impact than if it had been set in Ireland. We don't have as big of an influencer culture. We do, don't get me wrong, there are quite a lot of influencers in Ireland, but I think we're not at the level that the US would be. There are a few influencers in Ireland that you would never hear about in the US, but there are loads of them in the US that you would hear about back in Ireland. So I think that this wouldn't have had the same kind of impact. It probably wouldn't make the same global impact if it had been set in small town Ireland. I think the values as well would have been completely different in this book. It would have read like a whole different story. So I think Louise made a really intelligent decision there to set it in the US. There are so many twists and turns in this book that I actually messaged Michelle, who finished it before I did. I messaged her with a couple of predictions where I thought that this was going, and she was completely poker faced. She just said, oh, okay, I didn't think about that. And then it took me down a completely different path to where I thought it was going to go. And I think that that really stands to Louise as an author as well. That you can think that you're in a secure situation and you think that you know where you're going, and then she just spins the wheel completely and ends up bringing you down a completely different way that you thought you were going. As I said, this book has not been released yet. It's coming out on the 12th of May in Ireland and the UK, and I absolutely think you should go and pick up a copy of this one. Those are 3 books that I have buddy read with some friends of mine. Have you ever taken part in a buddy read and did you enjoy it? Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.